Does anyone remember this show from Cartoon Network? Whoa, what? It's so pretty! Oh, no, please, can we not? Can we turn this off now?
Led through the mist.
October. It's beautiful this time of year. The leaves turn orange, the weather is breezy, and I have to cover my eyes and mute my audio every time a YouTube ad comes on. Ads this time of year are always too scary for me. I was a coward growing up, and I'm a coward now. Some things just never change. And speaking of which, ever since I found Over the Garden Wall, I've made a tradition out of watching it every October. It's just the perfect show for this autumn season, and I seriously regret not watching it when it first came out because I was too scared of it. I think I saw one scary scene and I avoided it until years later when I saw the amount of praise that it got. And you might be thinking that this show wasn't all that scary and that I'm over exaggerating, and yeah, okay, for the most part you're right, but you see, I'm a special kind of coward. When I was a kid, I avoided great shows like Ed, Edd n Eddy because the animation style scared me, or Robot Chicken because the intro legitimately traumatized me as a kid. I remember having nightmares of that show for weeks, and even now as a 20-year-old, it still makes me uncomfortable. Over my years of watching Over the Garden Wall, I've gained a deep appreciation for the way it tells its story. Every single frame, line of dialogue, and piece of imagery is meaningful and serves a purpose. The story was very clearly planned out from the beginning, and the show doesn't waste even a second. Even the intro, the thing that most people skip, is meaningful, and I wish that more shows were like that. Short and concise stories might not be a big deal for a lot of people watching, but there have been shows that were ruined for me because of the amount of filler they had. The main culprit that comes to mind is Steven Universe. Steven Universe is a great show. It has complex characters, great plot lines with emotional stakes, and a deeply layered narrative, not to mention a soundtrack so iconic that it spawned countless parodies and covers from fans across the internet. But the more I watched Steven Universe, the more I grew to hate it. This was primarily because of the amount of filler that it had. And listen, I understand that most of it was for world building and character development, and I'm totally fine with having filler when it revolves around the main cast and sets out to expand them as characters, helping the viewer to better understand their motivations or what makes them tick. But there are still so many episodes that feel completely meaningless and shoehorned in. I'm talking about when the show picks and focuses on a random person from the town that I've never heard of or even care about. The more I encountered these types of episodes, the more I felt like Steven Universe didn't respect my time, and this feeling I had was stronger for Steven Universe than any other show because of its long and erratic release schedule. Sometimes episodes come out week after week, and then other times it'd be months of waiting just to see that a random citizen joined a band or got a job that they wanted. And so because of that, I fell in love with shows that are more tightly knit and smaller in scale. Over the Garden Wall follows these two boys named Wirt and Greg. They're brothers who have gotten lost in a mysterious forest called the Unknown, trying to find their way home. As their journey progresses, they gradually encounter increasingly weird and dark situations. Wirt, the older brother, is relatable in his self-doubt and tendency to overthink, and for most of the story, his motivations and actions are fueled by his fear of the unknown. He looks at every scenario through a lens of pessimism and focuses his mind on the worst possible outcome. His brother Greg, on the other hand, is silly, carefree, and optimistic towards everything the two boys come across, and fearlessly leaps into every situation with the expectation that everything will turn out alright. Their dynamic is so simple, and yet there's something about it that feels so elemental and timeless. The show is beautiful. The world is animated in the style that's reminiscent of early 20th century cartoons. It's gothic while also being bright, vibrant, and full of personality. There's a unique feeling about this world that sets it apart from any other animated show that I've ever seen. There's an uneasiness to each scene, even if nothing on the screen warrants that feeling. The world is both lively but static and dead. It's both comforting and yet incredibly ominous. The Woodsman visually stood out to me the most. There's something fundamentally different about the way he shot and animated. There's a smoothness and a menace about the way that he moves, talks, and interacts with the world. Every time he's on screen, he steals the scene and commands my full attention. And the soundtrack is one of the best I've ever heard. It elevates every scene that it's in and adds an incredible layer of depth to the world that just wouldn't feel alive without it. Beyond this surface level beauty, the show has one of the best character development arcs for its main character, Wirt. Earlier, I mentioned that Wirt is fueled by his fear of the unknown, but it goes much deeper than that. He lets his fear drive him as a character and is often paralyzed by it. He always assumes the worst of a situation and shows little to no interest towards things that he doesn't understand. Throughout his journey through the unknown with Greg, he encounters many frightening characters and scenarios, and each time it's shown to him that the darkest assumptions he may have had about them were completely wrong. Like in the first episode, the two brothers run into the woodsman, and Wirt immediately assumes that the man is an axe-wielding murderer, but it later turns out that he's actually just a good man who bears an unspeakable burden. Or like in episode 7, when he thought that Lorna was just an innocent girl enthralled by a child-eating witch with a magic belt. But as it turns out, Lorna is the one that's evil. She's possessed by an evil spirit that feeds on lost souls, and Auntie Whispers, the assumed witch, was just a caring old lady trying to suppress Lorna's curse by keeping her busy. There's an example like this that can be made from every episode, and as the story progresses, Wirt learns to shed the fear that drove his inaction and paralyzed him from having new experiences. He starts to open up more, taking risks, even leaving a place of safety to rescue Greg. Instead of defaulting to fear and panic like the Wirt we were introduced to at the start of the show, Wirt has learned to observe and understand his surroundings before he jumps to conclusions. This revelation and change in his character is ultimately what defeats the beast and brings the boys back home. In his final encounter with the beast, Greg is contorted inside an Edelwood sapling, on the verge of death, and the beast offers to put Greg's soul inside the lantern. As long as Wirt keeps it lit, Greg's soul will stay alive forever. A younger Wirt would have taken the beast's words at face value, but Wirt stands his ground and doesn't submit to the beast's will, figuring out that the lantern houses the beast's own soul. The beast tries one last time to scare Wirt into submission, but Wirt's resolve is just too strong. Wirt's journey is a lesson that I've taken to heart. There's never a good reason to let yourself be paralyzed by the fear of what might happen, because the scariest part of the unknown is that it is unknown. But once you make the effort to know and embrace the unknown, it's never as bad as it seems.
Dancing in a swirl of golden memories, the loveliest lies of all.